Hey YouTube, Rob here, bringing you another video. Today I'm doing my end of, what are we? April? Yeah, end of April, I can't remember. End of April movie update, DVD and Blu-ray update. I did sort of try and film this video last night and didn't really work. I just sort of I did a few sort of takes of it and it just, yeah, I just wasn't working, so I decided to sort of leave it and I might give it another go tonight. And plus I'm having a few drinks too, so that hopefully that might help me through it. So yeah, I actually got a drinking buddy too. I picked up a drinking buddy on the way home, and his name's Wally. I thought he was pretty cool, so he's sort of ended up coming home with me and helping me have a few drinks. So that's Wally. Anyway, I just thought he was pretty cute, so I sort of picked him up. So that doesn't sound right, does it? I picked him up. Anyway, we'll keep moving. So yeah, I've got a stack of Blu-rays and a few DVDs here. Just some sort of stuff that I've bought recently and sort of got around to watching. So we'll get straight into it before I start rambling on too much. Okay, so the first one here is actually a film that came out, I think, last year. A lot of people sort of, gave it, the big thumbs up and said it was a good movie, and were sort of raving about it. So I sort of did a bit of a blind buy and sort of picked it up. It is The Way, Way Back. Basically, this one's about Duncan here, who's a very sort of awkward, 14-year-old teenage boy, and sort of goes on this sort of summer vacation with his mum, and who's Toni Collette, and her new boyfriend, Steve Carell, who's not particularly nice to Duncan, as we sort of find out during the movie. Duncan doesn't really want to go on this, sort of this vacation, and I think he'd rather sort of be with his dad for the summer. I thought it wasn't a bad film. I didn't think it necessarily was sort of, quite as amazing as, some people were sort of, I was sort of led to believe. I don't know. Perhaps I didn't sort of relate to it perhaps as much as some other people. But it was, I thought it was alright though. Some, nice sort of fun moments to it and some good scenes. And, it's basically, Duncan here he does manage to sort of get a job at the local, sort of like a water park, and that's sort of run by Sam Rockwell. He's sort of I guess in some ways he sort of takes Duncan here under his wing and sort of shows him the ropes, type thing. So yeah, I don't know, it wasn't a bad movie. I just didn't think it was quite as good as some people were sort of saying it was. I think the only thing I probably would perhaps sort of mention, one of the sort of things that people do sort of talk about when they're sort of talking about this particular movie, they just sort of talk about the Steve Carell character and how he's not particularly nice to Duncan here, and which I can sort of agree with. But I think in some ways, like at the sort of beginning of the movie, there's just sort of this probably the scene that most people sort of talk about, maybe the sort of Duncan here and Steve Carell sort of I can't remember the actor's name. Anyway, they're sort of driving along to to get to this summer house for the summer, and Steve Carell sort of asks Duncan here, what do you sort of rate yourself out of 10? And Duncan, doesn't really want to answer the question. He doesn't really care, but he sort of says, "Oh, 7" or something." He just sort of says 7, and and then Steve Carell says, "Well, I think you're about a 3." Which is not, obviously not particularly, nice thing to sort of say to someone, giving them sort of a 3 out of 10. There's also sort of scenes where, he sort of gets Duncan to sort of, he sort of says, well, you should clean up your plate when you finish dinner, and, you should help with the bags, and, sort of, I guess in some ways giving Duncan a bit of a hard time, I suppose. But I think in some ways, maybe, I think he was just sort of giving perhaps a bit of tough love, maybe, in some ways, and, perhaps sort of getting Duncan to sort of, I guess in some ways maybe improve himself, maybe, saying he's a 3 and, telling him perhaps he can sort of work on himself and be a bit better person, perhaps, look after your mother and, sort of help out a bit more. And I don't know. I guess in some ways, perhaps be a bit more of a man sort of thing. And I don't know. 'Cause I mean, you sort of, Steve Carell has a daughter as well, and she's there as well, and she sort of gets away with, she can sort of do whatever she wants, I suppose. But Yules, sort of does sort of give Duncan a bit of a hard time about certain things. I don't know. It's just something I sort of noticed. I don't think in some ways necessarily that perhaps Steve Carell was perhaps being mean to Duncan. I think he's perhaps some ways just perhaps trying to get Duncan to sort of be a bit more mature maybe, and Anyway, I don't know, just a sort of a thing that I sort of noticed when I was sort of watching it. So that's the way back. Wasn't too bad, I thought. Anyway, so the next film is actually a film I just sort of picked up because it was relatively cheap, and I thought it was just going to be a sort of a, good cheese, as some people sort of say here on YouTube. It's Cat Run with what's her name? Paz Vegas. Yeah, I've never sort of heard of her before, but that's her there. This is actually pretty good, I thought. I mean, I just thought it was going to be some sort of sort of silly sort of movie, but I thought it was actually quite good. They had some nice little layers to it. I mean, you've got sort of a lot of different sort of characters sort of in the film, and so there's a bit of sort of a layered sort of texture to it. So you've got the main character here. She's kind of like a prostitute, I suppose, but she's kind of like a high class escort, I suppose is probably better, a better way to describe it, I suppose. So she sort of goes to this party, and she sort of sees something that she probably shouldn't have seen. She has to sort of go on the run, and the guy that was sort of running the party, I think he's like a corrupt, what do they call him on the back here? Like a corrupt businessman or something, and he's sort of chasing her, and he hires like an assassin to try and track her down, and then there's these two detectives, sort of private detectives that are trying to track her down as well. So there's sort of a few different sort of characters, within the film, and but I thought it was just really sort of fun, nice sort of scenes to it, and some good action, and nice sort of story to it, and a good sort of fun movie. So actually quite enjoyed that one. So that's Cat Run. Next one was actually a film that I actually thought was actually pretty good. It's a sort of film that I've never sort of heard of before, and I just sort of picked it up on a bit of a whim because it did sort of sound interesting from what I sort of read. I think I must have sort of found it perhaps on IMDb. I was sort of just looking at the what the sort of film was about, and it sounded quite interesting. But it's a film I sort of was surprised that no one sort of really talks about that much, because these particular films are sort of ones that are sort of quite popular, I think. It's called Indian Summer. I think it came out in, I think it's 1994, I think. I actually thought it might have been a bit of a sort of later film, but I think it's actually relatively old in some ways. It's got a few stars in it too. It's got Bill Paxton, Alan Larkin, Diane Lane, and a few other people, I think. It's sort of about, I think it's sort of 8 sort of friends, and it's kind of like a 20-year reunion type thing. They all, when they were sort of younger, they all sort of went to this summer camp, sort of when they were kids, and this is kind of them sort of 20 years later, and they sort of go back to the summer camp, and because I think the summer camp's sort of closing down. This will sort of be the last sort of summer that'll sort of be open. They'll sort of go back and sort of reminisce, and they sort of play sort of pranks on each other, and sort of raid the kitchen in the middle of the night, and sort of rekindle some of the old romances that they sort of had when they were kids, and sort of stuff like that. It's just a really sort of fun movie, I thought. Just nice sort of I guess in some way, it's just interesting to sort of see how these people have evolved, I suppose, from being kids to sort of being adults, and I guess in some ways perhaps it's got that bit of a sort of Stand By Me type vibe to it. I suppose that's probably not necessarily the best movie probably to sort of relate it to, but definitely that's sort of, I don't know, same sort of vein maybe in some sort of ways. But yeah, good movie though. I definitely would recommend this one actually. Good sort of fun sort of movie. So that's Indian Summer. On to something a bit more serious now. A war film from I think 1979. All Quiet on the Western Front. I actually quite enjoyed this one. I thought it was actually really good. Because most sort of war films that I've sort of seen have all sort of been from the British side. Well, this one's sort of more sort of from the German, sort of side, I suppose. So yeah, good sort of scenes to it, and sort of in some ways sort of a sad, depressing type movie, I suppose, because you sort of see what war's really like, sort of thing, and some sort of rather sort of graphic sort of scenes. it's kind of got a bit of a sort of a Full Metal Jacket type vibe to it. You sort of got these sort of young boys that are sort of, the school year's ending, and so their teacher sort of, suggests to them that it might be, a good idea to perhaps, join the war effort and, go to war and sort of fight for your country and, and sort of be a man, type thing. So they sort of go through boot camp, and then they sort of eventually just sort of go out and, out to war, and they sort of realise that it's, not necessarily quite as good as it, or, not quite as, it's not really quite what they sort of thought it was going to be. It's rather sort of horrible, you know what I mean? But I thought, yeah, good sort of film though. I thought real movie, I guess, and so if I could everyone sort of perhaps sort of put it like that, I suppose, a real movie. Yeah, there's definitely a good movie though. Definitely would recommend this one. All Quiet on the Western Front. Okay, I've been on a bit of sort of an 80s movie sort of kick recently. Sort of been watching a few sort of classic 80s movies. So I've got a John Hughes film here. He was probably one of the most sort of famous directors, I guess, from the 1980s. 16 Candles here, which I think I've actually sort of had this movie for perhaps for a little while. I just sort of got around to sort of watching it. I don't think it's necessarily one of sort of his best movies, I suppose, but I did sort of quite enjoy it though. Got Molly Ringwald here. She's sort of been in a few of John Hughes' films. I think the sort of film I think it's sort of set sort of over one night. I think it's like prom night, I think, and sort of about these sort of young kids and I guess what they sort of get up to, I suppose, over that night, I suppose. The sort of one sort of scene though, which I did kind of find a little bit disturbing, and I have sort of been on IMDb, and other people sort of may mention too of this particular scene, sort of like a date rape, type scene in it, which is a bit disturbing, I think. Probably, I guess maybe back in the 80s it might have been sort of seen as a sort of a funny type thing, I suppose, and harmless, I suppose, in some ways. But I think these days it can be sort of seen as a bit disturbing, I suppose. I won't sort of spoil what that scene is, but it's a little bit disturbing though, I think, if you by today's standards, Anyway, but yeah, it wasn't too bad though, I thought, nice sort of 80s sort of teen movie, John Hughes always sort of makes these sort of young adult type, school type movies, and they're always pretty good normally. 16 Candles. Another 80s classic, sort of a cult classic, I suppose. That would be Heathers. I think it says on the back here, without Heathers, there would be no Jawbreaker, no Mean Girls, and certainly no Juno, which I can sort of, relate to that quote. This actually wasn't too bad as well, actually, I thought. Definitely a sort of a Mean Girls type vibe to it. She's sort of got, Winona Ryder here, and she's sort of, kind of one of the sort of mean girls, I suppose. She's sort of friends with the sort of the stuck-up rich bitches, I suppose, of the school, and she's getting a little bit sick of them, I suppose. And then Christian Slater comes along. He's sort of the alternative rebel type guy, and sort of drives a motorcycle, and is a bit mysterious and a bit different sort of thing. So I don't know if that's spoil the storyline to it, but they do sort of team up and get a bit of revenge, I suppose, on these sort of stuck-up bitches, I suppose. It was a sort of fun sort of movie. So that's Heathers. Another movie, Dirty Dancing, which my good friend on here, Sammy, Faligar 517, sent to me the other day. He sent me a few movies in the post, which was really great of him. Thanks, Sammy. This is another great, 80s movie. Definitely a sort of another sort of cult movie, I suppose, of the 80s. Definitely just a really good sort of feel-good, type movie, and perhaps a little bit, not necessarily the best film ever made or a masterpiece by any sort of means, but it definitely has a bit of heart to it, and nice sort of romance to it, and maybe even perhaps the most famous chick flick of all time. I don't know. I'm not sure if you want to class it as that, but definitely a good movie though. I did quite enjoy it. I have sort of seen it before, but so that's Dirty Dancing. Good movie, that one. Okay, so on to the DVDs now. This is actually a TV show. One of my probably all-time favourite TV shows of all time, and I just sort of picked this set up a little while ago. It's a bit of a sort of obscure TV show which no one's probably ever sort of heard of. I think it ran from 1986 to 1991, so it's definitely an old sort of show, and I'm sure a lot of people never ever heard of it, but it's definitely one of my favourite TV shows of all time. that would be Brushstrokes. Pretty sure I have sort of talked about this one before on my channel. Definitely a great TV show, I think. Not necessarily everyone's taste, maybe, and it is perhaps a little bit dated by today's standard. But this is sort of series 1 to 6, and I think I do own sort of one. I think it's series 1 to 3 or something on DVD. But I just sort of decided to sort of pick up the full complete set because I'm a big fan of this TV show. So I'm a big sort of fan here of Cal Halman. He's used to sort of, this is where I sort of was sort of first introduced to him in. So basically I sort of decided to pick up some of his movies as well. So that's sort of what I'm going to talk about. But this is a great TV show. I won't necessarily talk about it too much in this video. I should make perhaps perhaps a whole video of it one day. But that's Brushstrokes, definitely a great TV show. But I did sort of pick up some of his movies though. That's sort of the main thing I wanted to sort of talk about in this video. The first one is actually one called Babylon, I think from 1981. This is sort of one that apparently was a bit of a sort of a cult classic. I think from the early 80s, sort of a British sort of cult classic movie. I think it's actually, the DVD only sort of came out, I think recently, I think in the last few years, I think. I think there was a sort of a limited sort of VHS release, and it was sort of definitely a sort of a bootleg type movie that sort of got passed around and did sort of become a bit of a cult classic, I suppose, for the people that did sort of like it. Don't they sort of show much of Cal Halman though, which is a bit disappointing. Sort of the main reason why I sort of picked up the film. It's more sort of about these sort of Jamaican guys sort of thing. It's definitely sometimes a bit of a sort of period piece, I suppose, and just sort of these sort of Jamaicans, sort of blacks living, sort of moving into sort of the white neighbourhood, I suppose, and some of the racism and the poverty that they sort of go through, and certain things. You got I think David, he's sort of the main sort of character, and just sort of follows him, I think, over a week or so, and like during the day he works in like a garage, and but at night time he sort of works as like a DJ sort of thing. He sort of does sort of plays reggae music, and his girlfriend leaves him, and he sort of gets beaten up by the police because I think he's stolen something, and his best friend's getting engaged, and he's sort of where they sort of go and play music, that sort of gets sort of trashed. Someone comes along and sort of breaks in and smashes all the equipment, all the musical equipment, and but I thought it wasn't too bad though. I thought I'm really sort of glad that it did sort of have subtitles with it though because it definitely was a very hard to sort of understand the Jamaican sort of accent, and so it was really good to sort of have the subtitles to sort of read along with. And as I sort of said before, it didn't sort of necessarily star much of Cal Halman. It was sort of, I think him and the only one other sort of white actor, with the only two white guys that were sort of actually in the movie. The rest are all Jamaican guys. This is sort of a special edition. It's sort of got I think like a 20-page booklet inside, and it's sort of been remastered, and definitely had a bit of an upgrade to it. But yeah, I thought it wasn't too bad though. I thought a look into sort of what the early 80s was, I guess, in London at the time, what it was like to be a sort of a black person, I suppose, living in London at that time. So that's Babylon. And the final DVD here, one called Party Party, which also sort of stars Cal Halman. It actually has some, I wouldn't say necessarily sort of famous people, I suppose, in it, but I do know a fair few of these people from sort of other British shows that I do sort of watch, because I'm a big sort of fan of sort of British comedy. Got Caroline Quinton. She was in Remember Having Badly and a few other sort of great sort of TV shows. We got Daniel Peacock. He was in probably most famous probably for the Comic Strip Presents, which also sort of starred Rick Mail and Adrian Edmondson, and some other great sort of British comedy stars. Also got Gary Olson. I think he was one of the regulars in the bill. I think he's later on just sort of became one of the was in the bill. And who else we got here? Nick Berry. He was I think he was in sort of Heartbeat. It's sort of the main sort of police guy. Nick Rowan, I think the character's name was. Also stars Kim Thompson. She was in Brushstrokes as well. She sort of played Leslie, the character of Leslie in Brushstrokes. Anyway, I'm going off topic, I suppose, but it does sort of star a lot of sort of, to me, sort of, famous British comedy stars. So this one, Party Party came out, I think, in 1983, and A bit of a very interesting watch, I think. It was a rather sort of, perhaps, sometimes a bit of a dated film, I suppose. I did sort of find perhaps the characters sort of being a bit sort of nasty, I suppose, to each other, especially the Caroline Quinn, because I think she was supposed to be the chubby girl of the party sort of thing. So all the guys weren't really interested in her; they're only sort of interested in the more pretty girls in the film, and sort of the guys are all sort of rather sort of sleazy and just trying to pick up women, and rather obnoxious in sort of some ways, and the women are all sort of rather sort of dumb and slutty, and just I guess perhaps just trying to find the best looking guy at the party so they can sort of take you home, type thing. It was just, I don't know, it's sort of rather sort of not particularly nice characters, I didn't think necessarily. But there were some sort of great sort of scenes, sort of suppose, and some really great sort of one-liners, and I guess in some ways a bit of a sort of fun movie, I suppose, in some ways. But I didn't think it necessarily was that fun, because I thought I'd sort of find some of the characters rather sort of not particularly likeable, sort of thing. But I don't know, it was sort of a film I perhaps would watch occasionally. I wouldn't necessarily watch it all the time. But yeah, that's Party Party. I don't know what to sort of say about it, I suppose, but wasn't too bad, I suppose, but not necessarily that great. So that's Party Party. So that's my update. A bit of a sort of a mixture there, I suppose, of different sort of films. Again, if you sort of seen any of these films, certainly leave me a comment below and tell me your thoughts. I think I might sort of end it there. Thanks for watching, and I'm sure I'll be back very soon with another video for you. So for now, bye.